Bucks make some more moves on a very eventful day of free agency. What does Frank Madden think about the future of this team and the move to bring in Miles Turner? We open up that debate, and what other moves the Bucks could have left. Coming up next.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined once again by Camille Davis and Frank Madden. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day, each and every day. And those of you that were with us earlier in the day as we record this, yesterday's show as we went live for the news that the Bucks have signed Miles Turner, more than 10,000 of you checking that one out. And we've gotten a little bit more clarity on that and the surrounding moves as well. So let's just start here. Camille and I shared our thoughts on it. Frank, you didn't have that opportunity. So as you were absorbing this news that the Bucks have gotten Miles Turner and everything else that came with the fallout here, what were you thinking and how were you observing this?
My first reaction was I assumed it was like a sign and trade, because the idea of them conjuring, 25 million of cap space just like did not register as like, a possibility. So that immediately got me nervous because I was like, did you give the Pacers your 2031 first and Kuz and, maybe just Kuz and the 2031 first, to bring Miles Turner in? And that suddenly was like, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take Miles Turner as my team's starting center, especially given the discussion we were having last night, talking about like, DeAndre Ayton question mark.
Yeah, I
like
think DeAndre Ayton up. Yeah, actually.
Like I was, I think I said it last night and tweeted it today. Like I'd rather be mediocre without DeAndre Ayton than mediocre with DeAndre Ayton, because I don't think he's like a winner, needle mover. In the grand scheme of the universe. So
I don't think he's a noodle mover either.
No, he doesn't move noodles. We've never seen him at a ramen shop, so who knows? But I think with Turner, obviously, yeah, I the way I framed it was like I had to pick up the parts of my brains and put them back into my head when I first saw the deal. So I was relieved when I found out that it didn't involve the 2031 first, but then this Dame wave and stretch thing, just, like we hadn't really even like contemplated the idea of doing this, right? Like literally nobody has ever stretched a number as big as this 112, 113 million that was owed Dame. And so, it's just, now you've got just this 22.6 or whatever $1 million figure that's just going to be sitting there dead on your cap sheet on my precious Google sheet for the next 5 years. I may stop maintaining that spreadsheet. That thing is probably going to outlast me doing this podcast. If we're going to be honest here, I often say we're going to be dead by 2031. Certainly my spreadsheet will stop getting updated before then. So yeah, it's kind of unprecedented waters. And what exactly does it mean? Well, it is an expanding cap world. So, that obviously like dulls some of the impact. Maybe not expanding as much as we thought. We heard
that's what I wanted to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. We heard the other day that, even with the massive TV deal money coming in, the cap, I think we've just been assuming it's going to go up the max 10% every year. It did this year, but now they're projecting it won't go up that much next year. And I haven't looked into like the mechanics or if that's going to be indicative of the future as well or what. But that becomes pertinent, when you're trying to essentially drown out this fixed number that's just going to be on your cap every year. Sorry, Justin, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to bring that up too, of 7% raise versus 10, and the year after, to me is the telling one, because to your point, we don't know if the league is just kind of being conservative here because the RSN thing is still, let's see what happens there. I mean, that's a big loss of revenue, but if they're being conservative on that front, if it's something they eventually just kind of take in house and make money off of that, where, hey, we've lifted it and it's part of League Pass and everybody's going to be happy. And then there comes another windfall, not, like billions of dollars, but it starts to bump it up again. And they said, okay, we were conservative and now we're seeing this so we can push it back. Or if it's just like, yeah, it's not going to be 10, it's going to be 7 or so for the next couple of years after that, in which case 3% less than you expected annually compounding adds up for guys that are getting the 8% raise, for teams that were saying, well, it's going to be offset by the rising cap by 10%, and for teams that have $22.5 million in dead cap space.
Yeah, that part to me is what sticks out too. If salaries are increasing faster than the cap is, like you said, everybody's projecting 10, but if it's 7 or 1, what if the year after that, what if it's 5? Like, we don't really know the parameters at this point. It's just been an assumption. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I mean, just to give people a sense of this, so this year the cap's about 155.
155, yeah.
Next year it would have been 170-ish if it had been a 10%. Instead, it's, I think, projected to be like 166 or something like that.
Yeah.
165, 166. So that's, $4 or $5 million, which, is, you might say, well, it's not like a huge amount, but again, we're talking about 22 million of dead cap every year. But we can talk more about that, like, how, what our emotions are about seeing a random number on a spreadsheet. But so I guess just to kind of tie it out. So I think obviously, to turn the concerns about the Bucks' big rotation sort of on their head relative to where we were 24 hours ago, obviously was a positive thing. I think the fact, though, that they had to give up those 2 second-round picks with Connaughton to get Micic, who stinks. Like, every time I saw him in a basketball game these last few years, I was like, I can't believe this guy's an NBA player. So I was like, there must be some more to this. And, the discussion today has been that he's going to be giving up money out of his $8 million. He's going to be giving up a significant amount of that to go back to Europe. But how much, is pretty important in the mechanics of how much do the Bucks, like, what sort of other contortions do the Bucks have to do with their cap sheet in order to free up the room to sign Miles Turner to this deal. So as a purveyor of cap spreadsheets, I'm definitely like annoyed because I can't tell you guys like it's exactly this and this. I've been DMing with Yossi, one of the preeminent cap guys on Twitter, who's a great follower, Yossi Gozlan on Twitter, YOSSI GOZLAN. I was on his pod a few weeks back, and we were just messaging because really, I mean, I think and it's like, this may seem like not trivial, but a weird thing to sort of swing my opinion of this deal on, but the one, the obvious thing now is that this shines a light. Okay, your bigs are in pretty good shape now. You've gotten way younger, as you guys pointed out. You're 8 years younger at your starting center position with Miles Turner. But it just shines a light on the fact that you have one-ish point guard in addition to Giannis and KPJ, and Rollins obviously is a guy that we all liked and thought like, oh, he's a restricted free agent, so he's the guy that you should definitely be able to retain. But what we heard was they had to rescind the qualifying offer. I was messaging with Yossi about like, so can they still retain his early bird rights? How many of these cap holds and bird rights were, non-bird rights were they renouncing, etc. Yossi's guess was he was thinking that Micic is going to give up pretty much the majority, like most of what his deal was for. And then Yossi was, and he's kind of speculating here a little bit, but he was guessing that they could keep Rollins and use early bird rights to re-sign him, which would allow them to go above the minimum. Because again, if they can only offer the minimum, then it's like, well, you're kind of a sitting duck here. Yeah, exactly. A team can come in and obviously, like, don't have to bid much. And with for a guy like Ryan, he hasn't had any big paychecks, right? Like
Right.
I'm not going to blame him for taking the most money that comes his way. He's on a two-way until late last season with the Bucks. So hopefully, fingers crossed, there is a path to keeping Ryan Rollins. I know Bobby Marks was also projecting that the Bucks didn't use the room exception, which, not to get too far into this, right? But like 24 hours ago, we were thinking that when all these deals were actually going to be executed, they would be using the biannual exception for KPJ. They would be using part of the mid-level exception for Gary Trent. And then we found out, oh no, actually they could use the non-bird exception to do that. So they had the full mid-level. To make this trade happen, they had to renounce the mid-level. Their trade exception also would be gone. And so you suddenly, like, a lot of the stuff we were assuming yesterday kind of goes out the window. But if you create cap space, which is what the Bucks obviously had to do to offer a deal this big to Miles Turner, they do get this $8.8 million room exception, which just so happens to like line up pretty well with
Gary
KPJ and Gary Trent's numbers.
You can split that between two players.
Yeah. And so I think the question I've been sort of trying to figure out all day is, did they actually do that, split it between those? Or Bobby Marks was suggesting that they still had, I think he was saying 3.3 million left of the room exception, which again, like, Bobby Marks is obviously like a machine on all this stuff. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, Bobby's got it wrong. But I just don't really understand. And that's why I was messaging with like Yossi and trying to figure out, like, does this make any sense to you? And Van Fayez, friend of the pod, like, we were messaging and saying like, what did you, what are you, how are you seeing the mechanics of how they actually freed up the cap space? So hopefully the Bucks math is better than ours. They are professionals. I think assuming the math was right, this is, a pretty incredibly creative way that they've done this. And it's obviously come with some major trade-offs in the form of the Dame dead cap number, in the form of having to give up 2 second-round picks, basically emptying your second-round pick clip almost, to move the Connaughton deal to get to this Micic buyout, which hopefully is most of the money, but it feels like we're doing like back alley buyouts instead.
I would assume it's because hasn't he basically already landed with a team in Greece? That it was one of the worst kept secrets, and it's widely assumed that's where he's going to end up anyway. But yeah.
So, but it's like, then if you're Micic's agent, you see the Bucks are over a freaking barrel now.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna. So anyway, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think the main question is,
well, you don't, Frank, because if it is in fact a team in Greece, you have a Greek treasure and potentially another one in Thanasis Antetokounmpo.
Is it a Greek team that he's going to? I didn't even know. I thought
another
we can loan him out. We can loan
okay.
him out to you guys. Thanasis.
So, but long story short, I mean, obviously, like, I think your mileage is going to vary depending on how you trade off all those things. I think what happens with Rollins or some other guard is obviously like one important part of this. So I'm crossing my fingers that they do figure out a way to keep Rollins. I'll feel certainly better if they do that, because at least then you've got, the two guys that were there when you had that nice run late in the season and are kind of, good upside swings at that kind of combo guard slot. And then really it's just like, how good do you think Miles Turner is? And I don't know, like, I've never been like the biggest Miles Turner fan. I think he fits. I think he's a better fit with Giannis than maybe, like, I like him more for the fit than just for kind of like his pure kind of talent and kind of capability set. I think defensively, I think he's more versatile. And you guys hit on this afternoon when I was trying to catch up with the pod earlier. I think he's more versatile than Brook. I mean, he can move his feet in space better than Brook can. Like, he moves a bit better than Brook, gets up and down the floor better than Brook. So he's similar stylistically to Brook, but I think he gives you at least a bit more malleability. But you're not like suddenly playing a different
scheme.
Yeah, like, I think you can maybe mix more things in with him, but you're not like fundamentally changing the identity of the defense, I don't think. So for better or worse, like, I think that's the reality. I think certainly for Giannis, that's probably preferable, that he's not going to have to obviously play center and that he'll have kind of another kind of roaming shot blocker next to him is probably something that he's comfortable with. And then obviously probably the more important piece, honestly, is the harder thing to find is the floor stretching that Turner brings. And he's obviously a very good mid-range guy and 3-point shooter. So, that's obviously like really important in terms of continuity, and just if the Bucks are going to piece together a respectable offense next year, having both of your bigs next to Giannis and Bobby and Turner be able to shoot is pretty important. So we'll see. And obviously at 29, he's not young, but he's, relative to Brook. Hopefully he ages like Brook. Brook, I think Brook was like 30. I think wasn't Brook like
he was 30
when he came to Milwaukee. Yeah. So, I mean, he was even a year older than what Turner is now. But, I think whereas last night we were kind of like, oh man, what are the Bucks going to do at point guard or at center? Now it's just sort of like it kind of flashes the light on like, man, they have one point guard and they have a whole bunch of like 6'4" guys. And, their small forward rotation is Kyle Kuzma and Taurean Prince. So, you just kind of line this team up against.
Wait, are you saying that's bad?
You line this team up against, like a lot of the teams that have been making moves in the East. Obviously, Indiana, you feel better about lining up against Indiana, but other than Indiana and Boston and taking their big steps back, certainly I think you line them up against the other teams that we've been talking about as sort of top 4 teams. I think they're a long ways from, being kind of paper competitors to those teams. Yeah. So I think you're still kind of stuck in the muck of,
third tier, basically.
Yeah, like the second half of that playoff bracket, which, there's obviously a huge difference between being a 5 seed and being an 8 seed. And who knows, in this version of the East, who knows kind of what who knows what tomorrow brings, guys, let alone, the start of the season in a few months' time. But they definitely have work to do. And I think probably, the question I think it makes me ask is, okay, we've been asking about the 2031 pick. What does this do to, your interest in moving the 2031 pick? Yeah. That I think is maybe the most interesting sort of, other than the Rollins thing, like that to me is probably the most interesting kind of follow-up question to all of this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to touch on from that. Some of the Miles Turner things. Another interesting tidbit about the second round picks that you brought up, and maybe the Bucks could replenish at least one of those, and those tiers that we kind of alluded to in the Eastern Conference as well. We'll get to all of that coming up next. This next segment is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you have ever wished managing your money felt easier, that's where Monarch Money comes in with the assist, telling you it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. You want to track down where all that money's going, maybe figure out how much of a portion of your daily and weekly budget is going to subscriptions, takeout, deliveries, you name it. It all adds up, and Monarch Money can help you spot where those are. If you share your finances with someone else, Monarch Money helps you stay on the same page and plan your goals in tandem. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. So really quick, too, I saw John Hollinger was the first one to bring this up, too, that we started the conversation with saying, this has got to be a sign and trade, right? And he was the first one to bring up, it would really behoove the Pacers to contact the Bucks and say, here's a second round pick. Let's turn this into a sign and trade so we can get that trade exception from this deal. So maybe you do get that. Obviously, being hard cap doesn't really impact the Bucks with the cap space that they cleared up. So that's one way to at least get one of those, in theory, back in the coffer. I think the tiers in the conference are Cleveland, as of right now, is clearly the team in the top tier. in the East. I would then say the Knicks and Magic, I would put as teams in that second tier. And then you got teams like the Bucks, the Hawks, the Celtics, who knows what happens with them. Those types of teams that are starting to fill out that third tier. But I think it's really just the number one tier, and then the gap starts to shorten with the other ones. But the Miles Turner fit, I mean, we didn't really talk about just how much you like this move, I guess, Frank, because we touched on Camille and I, the pros of Miles Turner. There are some cons that Pacers fans will point out, and one of those is like, hey, if you guys had issues with Brook Lopez's rebounding numbers, Miles Turner isn't the guy to point to either. He has taken a bit of a step backward in his overall defense, but it's still, you weren't going to find another option that replicates what Brook Lopez gave you, arguably better, as much as Miles Turner here. And I do think it's one of those moves where there may be just as many positives as I don't know about this, just not so much with Turner, but what it took to get there. But it can't get lost either that maybe more so than any other player, it is imperative, the system that Giannis is in and the players that are around him, and especially that position. And that's the type of guy you need. There is no one else out there other than Miles Turner that's going to play that style and allow Giannis to be on the floor with him.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't think Al Horford was coming for part of the mid-level exception? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the cleanest fit. So, like you said, for better or worse, it allows the Bucks to kind of keep doing what they've been doing on both ends, or at least have the optionality to do that. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I was looking at some of his on-off metrics, and the main one I wanted to look at was his defensive rebounding on-offs, like the percentage impact, because this was always the Brook Lopez thing, right? Because Brook and Miles are both guys that, like, people look at the raw stats and they say like, oh, they had 2 rebounds last night. Like, what are they doing? With Brook, I think people that followed the Bucks and followed the NBA, knew that him and Robin were kind of famously box out guys. So even though they didn't really get many rebounds themselves, their teams, you look at the percentage of defensive rebounds that their teams get when they're on the floor versus off the floor, it was always way higher when they were on the floor, right? Which to me, like, if you're saying somebody's a bad rebounder, then that means that your team's getting out rebounded when they're on the floor. But if your team always rebounds better with you on the floor, then you're doing something, and it's probably because you're occupying, you're boxing out, you're doing things like that. Now, I honestly, I haven't watched Miles enough, like, paid attention to his boxing out to tell you, like, oh yeah, like, he's one of the best box out guys or whatever. But at a minimum, like, if your concern is that the Bucks are going to be terrible in the defensive glass when he's on the floor, the Pacers were always clearly better with him on the floor from a defensive rebounding perspective than when he was off. So that allays some of my concerns there. And certainly Giannis, from a stats perspective, I'm sure will be fine if he has another big that just wants to box out and then let him actually get the rebounds and start the fast break. So we'll see. But I mean, he's not Mitchell Robinson, that's for sure, in terms of like defensive rebounding, offensive rebounding, presence, etc. And I mean, from again, like, same was true for Brook. Like, I mean, if you have these guys who are floor spacing bigs, they're not going to get many offensive rebounds just because of where they are on the floor. So I think that part is not as surprising. But yeah, we'll see. And again, I think the interesting question for me, and Zach Lowe on his pod was basically like Tyrese Halliburton made him look a lot better, and you certainly look at like his scoring, it went up after Halliburton got there. Also, I mean, Halliburton coming in also coincided with Sabonis leaving, which was also like kind of a weird fit, and they were obviously probably trying to occupy some of the same places on the floor between Turner and Sabonis. So there's probably some of that at play as well. So we'll see, because the Bucks, I mean, on paper, need him to score some points. Certainly, it's not like you've got the Dame Giannis trio pumping in, 50 to 60 points every night, and you can afford to have your other guys just kind of float in and out of games as far as scoring. Like, they do need him to be an offensive presence. And so we'll see kind of what he can offer. I mean, he was at like 15.6 this year. He was higher the last couple of years. I think if he's in that ballpark, that's probably okay. But, the Bucks are now in this awkward position where they have, a bunch of guys beyond Giannis who are like, fourth bananas, maybe third bananas in a best case scenario from a scoring perspective. And I would say Turner at his very best is probably a third banana. So you've got, you're down one banana, guys. You need a second banana, and that guy doesn't exist on this team right now. So I don't know. I mean, there's ways to compensate for that. It's interesting looking at Detroit. I know we've talked about like Detroit and kind of like whether they're one of those teams that's going to make a leap, but I mean, they don't have a second scorer either, and they don't have Cade is not Giannis from an offensive standpoint, obviously. So, they won 46 games last night or last year or whatever they got.
Yes.
So, I mean, you can win games this way, but it also underscores like Bucks are going to have to be good defensively next year. And I mean, that's nothing new. I think bringing Turner full stop, I think at least probably gives you
bringing him back to Milwaukee. After
exactly. I think bringing Turner in, I think gives you a credible path to being a good defense. But as you said, he's not like an all defensive caliber guy either. He has some limitations defensively, although again, maybe he's a little bit more malleable than Brook. So we'll see.
There's one other avenue there too that I want to get to coming up next, Camille. And also Frank brought it up, the 2031 pick and what the sequence of events here in this past day means for that. We'll open up that discussion next. So, I mean, I guess, Camille, it's always tough here. I mean, the body isn't even cold yet, but isn't one way to get better defensively knowing you don't have an undersized point guard that's not the greatest defender out there on the floor?
I mean, it's one way. I mentioned this earlier. I love the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron James and Steve Nash. And this week they had Kevin Durant on there. And one topic of conversation was undersized guards in today's NBA. And they made mention of the fact that being 6'2" or smaller as a starting point guard, like, we believe those days are kind of over in today's NBA, because the focus for defense is now, like, the NBA is such a picking on you type of league now. It's an exposure league, and opposing offenses are going to try to find whoever it is they feel like they can pick on and continuously do that until they see, like, actually, we can't do this any longer. And it's like not even just necessarily like on ball defense, but like, if we know you're bad in pick and roll coverage, we're going to continuously put you in that coverage. Like, that's the way that offenses are really geared now, really picking on players. So when you are an undersized point guard out there, the offense has to be lethal for you to be on that court. And if you are smaller, hopefully you have a bigger frame so that you're able to at least hold your own somewhat defensively. And that wasn't Dame's strong suit. Now, we did see periods of time where Dame put the effort in. We saw the hands. We saw quick hands from Dame. We saw effort plays. We saw some blocks every so often. But more often than not, when you are a smaller guard in that way, you just have some innate, disadvantages trying to play defense against bigger teams, which is why the point you made earlier about the Bucks have quite a few smaller guards on the roster at the moment, and the wing depth is kind of shaky as well when you're looking at who can defend. Like, when you think about a New York Knicks team that has a bunch of wings, a bigger team, when you think about Orlando, even Atlanta is a big team now at this point too. Like, how do you match up with those teams in those situations? So yeah, I think for the Bucks, like, you're going to miss that offensive firepower from Dame for sure, where you knew between him and Giannis, you were going to get 50, 55 points a game. But as we mentioned, when Dame went out with the blood clot and Ryan Rollins was inserted, not as if he's a big guard, but he's a 6'3", 6'4" guard that has a crazy long wingspan, which helps him defensively. Like, those are the types of smaller guards, if you're going to lean that way, that I think the Bucks would need to invest in, because defense is going to be really important. And offensively, if the offense is, Giannis centric, then, you really need those guys to knock down the shots. But I do think the defensive aspect of it, of Dame exiting, does open the pathway for more defensive minded guards to be in that spot, which could help the Bucks ultimately.
So I guess the big question, actually, you know what? Let's save the first rounder for a second from now. Frank, do you think maybe this is prisoner of the moment stuff and it's more cope than anything, but is there a chance, for as much as was made of the Bucks did what, and they're the first, that's the largest contract to be waived and stretched with this CBA and with things that we talked about, is there a chance, not that every team is going to do this, but the Bucks aren't the only team that does something with a contract this size for teams that say, I can't believe we actually agreed to this and we are severely handcuffed. This is our only way out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique situation because Dame was not going to play, at all for potentially the whole season.
Probably the whole year, yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a unique set of circumstances, and then add in sort of the pressurized space of the Giannis situation, and wanting to maximize, his remaining prime, and however much of that you can make sure happens in Milwaukee. So I don't think there's gonna. I wouldn't expect there's gonna be like a run on stretching $100 million contracts. I think you look at the Beal situation was probably the other
say, it opens
obvious
the door
one
for Phoenix to say somebody else did it. Let's do it.
I think the Beal situation was a bit. The Bucks are now bumping up against like Connaughton. They couldn't waive and stretch because it would have taken them over 15%. Of their salary being waived or waived and stretched. And apparently that was the issue with Phoenix, is like they couldn't have done that for that reason. So Beal was actually making too much money relative to their cap that they couldn't have done it even if they wanted to. So so that kind of, seems like Beal is maybe not going to be in the cards for this type of thing, at least this year. But, in a year, if he's still hanging on to his no trade clause and, they send him home or whatever, like, maybe at that point, they could do like a buyout or something of that nature. So we'll see. And honestly, though, the other thing too is, I mean, you did the stretch this year because obviously it created the cap space, and for people that aren't familiar with the waive and stretch rules, they could have waived Dame and just paid him
all of it,
his this year and next year salary, and not done anything to stretch it. If you stretch it, what that does is it basically takes the remaining years on the deal times 2 + 1. So if it's a 2-year deal, it becomes 5 years, stretch over 5 years. With Larry Sanders, back in the day, it was 3 years left. So it was 7 years of stretching at like $3 million and change a year for, what seemed like an eternity. And so, that
was that 2 years ago that ended?
I'm trying to remember like even when he was drafted. I think when he was drafted 2010, and
10,
so maybe was it Giannis? I mean, were Giannis and Jabari both on the team? So it was like, was it like 2015, something like that? So yeah, like 7 years would have been something like 2022, something like that. So a few years ago, it would have been the last year.
They bought him out. So yeah, it was probably 2023.
Yeah. So, sorry, I mean, my daughter is 7 years old, so like literally her lifetime is the same as how long Larry Sanders was getting paid. $3 million.
And now her Bobby Bonilla is Damian Lillard.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Well, I have a 2-year-old, so like when when she's 7.
Wow, what a time to be alive for those two.
Yeah, just really signposts for your childhood. Like who was on the books being waived and stretched during your childhood. So I don't know. We'll see. But it was kind of funny too, because it's like, I think for everybody, the reaction when it happens is like, oh God, this like feels like embarrassing for Dame. Like you're kind of kicking into the curb.
That was mine.
Like it feels like sad. It feels. I think as you reflect, it feels sad to look back on his 2 years and be like, man, like he came here, he asked out of like the place where he was minted, and Portland ends up in Milwaukee. That, you know, Bucks are one of the favorites in his first year, and they just don't live up to expectations. They have the injuries in the playoffs, and then, you know, a different version of the same story in year two. So it's kind of sad collectively. But it was funny because it's like, I don't know if it was Spears or who was basically saying, like, you know, don't feel sorry for Dame. Like,
it was Spears.
Somebody said, somebody used the term elated. And just think about it. He's getting paid.
There's been a lot of,
I mean, and some of that may be cope as well, Justin, you know, but look, like, I mean,
well,
clearly it wasn't working here. He's out for a year. Who knows what it'll be on the back end of this. This way he gets all of his money. He can go hang out with his kids while he's rehabbing, which maybe he was going to do anyway. And then, you know, he can pick a place where, you know, personally it fits better for him. And, you know, hopefully it's on the West Coast, so he's not in the Eastern Conference. And
it's going to be the Boston
potentially.
Well,
if you thought Milwaukee was far from Portland,
well,
maybe move his kids to Portland, Maine. Maybe then they'll be close. But
you know, that was the thing that struck me too, was those reports like, oh, more than 20 teams have reached out to him and he's elated. I mean, we kind of tiptoed around it before, but I tried to allude to this as best I could. It's always a sensitive subject for like personnel based decisions, with being a guy that does radio for the team. But I think this just confirms that the long belief that a lot of us had, that if Dame didn't get injured, he's very likely traded this summer. And maybe it's the Bucks saying that. Maybe if these reports are accurate, that Dame's elated, maybe it's Dame even approaching them and saying, this didn't work out, I would like to move on. But I think this basically confirms this was the end of the road. This was going to end. And yeah, it's just sad that it didn't work out, that he had a lot of things go wrong in his personal life. The saddest part is that, you know, he battled through blood clots and opened up about how terrifying that was for him to lose a cousin to the same thing during COVID, comes back, goes down. And now the last image of Damian Lillard is him sitting on the ground in disbelief, knowing he tore his Achilles.
Yeah, and we didn't even get to really see Damian Lillard and Giannis share the court come playoff time. Like, that's another part of the disappointment of just like the what ifs are still going to be there.
Well, like 29 minutes and 30 seconds or something?
Something like that. Like, it's not a substantial amount of time that they were able to share on the court in the playoffs when it really got down to it. Like, last season was a lot of conversation around this team, and Doc Rivers kind of gave the vibe of that locker room. The Dame's first year was like, hey, they're really just trying to get to the playoffs. Like, they're kind of lollygagging a little bit at times during the regular season. Their focus is the playoffs. And then come playoff time, Giannis is out with the calf. Chris is playing on a bad ankle, injures the other one during it, but continues to play. Dame goes out during that playoff series. Then the following year, leading up into the playoffs, you have the blood clot issue with Dame. He does come back, and then he tears his Achilles. And it's just like the injury luck was not on the Bucks side, and the what if about the fit is going to be there. But like I've said it before, I appreciate Horace taking the swing of looking at what that Bucks team before of like, hey, in the playoffs, you know, half court offense can become a problem. Like, let's make a move to trade some defense for some offense. You bring in Dame, and then you don't even get the opportunity to really see him in that situation. So it's a disappointing what if.
So the 2031 first, I mean, in light of all of these moves that the Bucks have made and continuing to say, well, we're just going for it now for the next couple of years, does this change? First of all, were we all kind of aligned of like, I'm not saying no, I'm not going to trade it, but I'm not just trading it for, you know, my fourth leading scorer on the team. And now I think that changes given what you've done here to add some of these pieces and knowing next 5 years we're paying $22.5 million to a guy that's not going to play. I mean, the way to view it is Miles Turner is on a max contract for the next 3 years, 4 years potentially if he picks up that option. So, I mean, for me, yeah, anything that I ordinarily would have said, no, that's not enough. Like, let's play for 2031. A lot of that is on the table for me now.
Yeah, the timeline has changed. Like, it's sped up. I feel like with this move to the point now where I'm not sure if it happens this summer, if it happens during the season. but like it feels like that pick is going to be gone, like NSYNC was singing about years ago, very, very soon, because that's the timeline has just been accelerated, in my opinion, with the Miles Turner move and with the cap situation for this team. And even with the contracts that the Bucks have been allegedly giving out so far in this offseason. And when you look at how the money is lined up, a lot of, 1+1s and the player options for that following year and so on and so forth, like the Miles Turner contract runs almost identically to Giannis's, I believe. Like it's pretty close. I think Giannis has the player option himself.
He's got the player option after the following season.
Yeah,
But
so
bringing that up too, also, I mean, we've said before the Giannis discussion is not going to go away. It's especially going to pick up big time next offseason if nothing is resolved. And I mean, it also puts you as a team in a very tenuous spot with the Bucks specialty now, and that everybody you sign this year is on a 1+1. And if things go south, all of a sudden, all of your roster is like, yeah, I'm declining. I'm moving on.
Gone. NSYNC gone. I'm telling you.
Sorry, I thought, are you making a Bye 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 reference, Camille, or is there a song?
No, the song Gone is like my favorite NSYNC song.
But either one, Camille. I mean,
they both do work. They both work.
Okay. A lot of my NSYNC knowledge is from my daughter liking the Trolls movies. A lot of like NSYNC and NSYNC adjacent stuff on the Trolls soundtracks. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think the types of players available to you by putting that 2031 into
or a
play,
second leading scorer,
right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it's fundamentally changed. I think, like, I don't know if the dollars work for Zach LaVine, but like that's probably like literally like the highest level type of guy that you're going to be talking about, right? Like, I don't think you probably don't even need to give up the 2031 if you want someone like a DeMar DeRozan, who's 36-year-old and a ball stopper, and I don't think that's a good fit with Giannis and the rest of this offense. What's going on in Toronto? Like Toronto is like, their cap sheet looks like there should be a contender, and they're like a 28-win team or whatever they were. Is there, again, like RJ Barrett or even like Quickly, who gets paid an absolute ton, but obviously there's some talent there, but kind of similarly, like you're not looking at RJ Barrett and saying like number 2 scorer on a championship team, right. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of just probably a question of just like how desperate are you to put that into play? But I mean, again, it's kind of silly to act like, oh, like now the die has been cast. I mean, the die has sort of been progressively more casts ever since the Drew Holiday trade. Like you started going into this major deficit in terms of future assets and picks way back then. And, obviously they have taken some big swings, principally the Drew trade and the Dame trade. And now the question is, do you kind of make that one final move here? Because you also have the 2032 swap, and then next summer you're gonna have the 2033 that you can send out. So every year there's an opportunity to send a new unprotected pick or swap out the door, which is very exciting, obviously, to think about. So,
is there a chance in the new CBA we can work in waived and stretched contracts too? Of
trade waived and stretched? Yeah, exactly.
We'll attach the 2031 first to the remainder of this waived and stretched contract.
It's just a cardboard cutout that sits on the end of the bench. Yeah,
next to cash considerations.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's like I know people throwing around like Trey Murphy, right? Like I just don't think you can get Trey Murphy for just a 2031 first, unless again you just luck out with the Pelicans being kind of dumb. Which hey, people have bet on that before and come up well on the other side. So we'll see. But I mean, the only certainty, I don't think any of us are going to sit here and say that we think John Horst is resting on his laurels and kind of just sitting back, unafraid to make a move. I mean, if any front office has been unafraid to take big swings, it's obviously this one. And one out of two on the Drew and Dame swings. We'll see with this Turner one. I think probably the odds of a like major win are lower, unfortunately. But I also don't know that we're going to look back on this thing specifically and say, oh, this was the bad move, this was the mistake they made, because again, the opportunity cost with Dame, it was pretty much a sunk cost at this stage anyway.
I'll say this really quick too. I think for that 2031 pick, for me, like we mentioned, the landscape hasn't changed. So like if there is a way that they can get someone like a Trey Murphy, a younger player that projects to be somebody who could continue to grow into a role that could be a number two, like for sure you go and do that. But I think the pathway might be you hold on to until the trade deadline and hope that over the course of the season as well, that Kyle Kuzma can improve. Someone like a Kyle Kuzma could improve his trade value. You could attach that to Kyle Kuzma's contract, look at him more of a positive, see what you can get at that point. Because one thing we're learning about this landscape of the NBA now in this parity era is that teams are going to be trying to shuffle those chairs on the deck, because a lot of teams think that they're very close to contention, or, hey, we can get a championship this year. So the trade deadline might be a better place for the Bucks to try to use that 2031 draft pick rather than in this offseason, unless you're able to pull off a deal like for Trey Murphy or so.
Or the offseason, yeah, to the point Frank made. I mean, you got all three of those are opening up the 2033 too next summer, and then a contract like Kuzma becomes expiring. So who knows? I guess the last thing, if we are to assume the Bucks retain Ryan Rollins, and they would still, that would put them at what, 13, I think, players.
15,
but that would put him at 15.
Yeah, I mean that's like the last domino here, right? Because you've got Gary, Jericho signing today. Those are 13 and 14.
Oh yeah, I'm missing Gary Harris. Or wait, no. So I have him at 13 with Gary Harris.
Is that including the buyout if that happens?
Oh, I'm including Micic. That's right. Yeah. So
Okay.
if you're right, so presumably here it'll bounce back down to 13. Again, like they're not like in any of tax or apron danger, so they're not like having to tiptoe that line. The problem is just they can't offer more than the minimum, which
more than the minimum.
And I was to add to the earlier conversation, I was just messaging. I think Hollinger wrote, like, Hollinger has them as having used up the full room exception, so he's saying all they have for Rollins is the minimum, which again would be unfortunate, although who knows. Get John Horst special a year from now. We'll take care of everybody. Yeah, we promise not to renounce your early bird rights next year, even though we did it this year. But I don't know. We'll see. So yeah. By the way, I didn't understand the Gary Harris signing. That one, like, John Horst has had tons of like good on the margin signings. Mostly have found his eye there, like, very good. Don't understand adding another 6'4" shooting guard that can't play small forward. That seemed weird to me.
Yeah, that was the weird part when you already have AJ Green under contract. But yeah, I mean, I guess it gives you more depth at the same position that everybody else in your roster seemingly plays. So if they do retain Ryan Rollins, if we assume that, the last thing is
55 wins.
What is the ceiling?
Lock it in. Ryan Rollins.
So you're taking the over there. What's the ceiling for this team? Second round exit?
Probably. Which after the last 3 years, I mean,
yeah, that's improvement. It's marked improvement. Considering you won 3 playoff games in the Giannis and Dame era.
Hearing it out loud, even though if we watched it, just mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, like, I don't know, just these the experience of watching these last few years, and like I'd also just like Doc is not the worst coach or anything like that, but it's been less than the sum of their parts as far as the team's performance these last couple of years. So just are you going to take a less talented roster and, somehow cook up something that maximizes that? I think you have to be skeptical about
are the spots Doc is shine.
I know, like, whether it was that first year in Orlando. Or the Clippers, year, like he's shown some ability to kind of wring more out of those types of situations, but I kind of want to see it. And we'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, again, like, even if they bring back Rollins and, let's assume there's no other kind of notable moves beyond that, I feel like you're probably somewhere between, losing in one of the play-in rounds as sort of a low-end outcome, losing in the play-in to, man, like getting to the second round feels like a major stretch. But, again, like as we've been saying, like the East obviously is in flux, let's say. So it only takes, Bucks have been on the business end of it the last few years. Like
maybe
all it takes
some
is
other
one
team gets injured.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe they get a good matchup.
Right. it only takes kind of one Chris Middleton wet spot, one banana peel to throw a series, kind of your way, and then you just don't know what will happen. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I kind of went on my rant last night. The national media is, again, going into full Cuban Missile Crisis mode on Giannis and like, what's he going to do? And, he's taking long walks on the beach, staring at himself in the mirror, trying to figure out if the Bucks are good enough. I don't even really care at this point. Like, I'm just like, look, I don't think he's going to leave. And the Bucks just need to try to put together the best roster they can. And I think Giannis is probably far more inclined to stay than the national media thinks he is. And if we get to the point at some point, where Giannis decides that he wants to change his mind and wants a different challenge in a different place, then, we'll deal with that if and when it happens. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really stressed at this point. I'm evolving beyond letting ESPN's, shows that nobody likes get me stressed about.
Upset you?
Yeah.
Smart
I went on my rant last night.
Yeah, and my expectations are low, right? Like it's almost like one of those things. Like I don't care if any of us say that we don't expect much from the Bucks. I've just said that, but somehow, like, I don't like it when the national media shit talks our team. So we can say it, but you can't. Okay, that's what this comes down to.
I did see there was an unnamed.
Don't scold us. Just don't scold our fan base or the teams like about this. Like, it's not that serious. Like, whatever.
I did see somebody from CBS Sports gave them an F- on their grade for
the CBS. You know what's funny? The CBS, like, was this Botkin? Was that the guy?
I didn't see who it was.
The CB. It's weird. CBS. There was the writer guy who broke the thing early.
The initial
he's
Giannis,
hearing, which was like kind of the biggest nothing burger, right? It was like other team executives think Giannis might ask out, and
right.
Like he got to do radio hits.
I mean, and even now too, all the reporting is Giannis is monitoring what's happening. Like, cool. Thanks for telling me absolutely nothing.
Yeah, CBS Sports. Like, I see the names of people, and then I click on their links, and they've got like 2,000 followers, and I'm just like, who are these people? Like, why am I being inflicted with their like random opinions of like anything? Like, these aren't like people that matter. But anyway, shots fired here late on the pod. I'm giving a little spicy Frank. Shout out to Bryn Riley, one of our loyal listeners. She's probably not listening this late in the pod. When I get really spicy, she hits me with a hashtag spicy Frank in the comments. So.
Camille, I guess in closing, we got the news a couple days ago. So backup plan for Ryan Rollins. Pat Beverly said he's gonna play in the league this upcoming season.
Here's my thing with this upcoming season.
Campaign is a free agent, guys. Campaign.
No.
Campaign can get us the
Pat Beverly guaranteed he will be back in the NBA this season. So
he very well might be, but for me in this season, like even before the Miles Turner trade, even now, like ideally, what I want the Bucks to continue to do is continue to get younger. Like if you're going to go out there and take a shot on somebody now, Like, hopefully they can bring Ryan Rollins back because at least we saw that, you know, he can play a bit. But like, take some shots on some of these younger guys that are out here on the market. Like, try to find your next Pat Connaughton to a certain degree. Try to find
What
your
do you
next
mean by that?
in the sense of like he was somebody who wasn't really heralded when he was, you know, a free agent coming out of
There's a
Portland.
number of ways you could have gone with that, Camille. Like, try to find the next guy the internet hates. Try to find the next guy that can score 43 points in a game. Try to find the next guy that's
You
just
need
a
somebody
magnet
who
for
gets
shots
kicked.
to the face.
You need somebody, that gets punched in the face as
all the
often as-
time. Yeah, but someone who can develop a little, like let's go that route. Like, if we're going to watch a year of Bucks basketball where there aren't many expectations attached to it, let's see if you can find some guys that might be able to continue to play some meaningful minutes for you for the upcoming years. Like, that's my approach to it. So we'll see if they go that route. Like, so far throughout free agency, you haven't seen anybody too much older than Giannis, you know, signed, and they brought guys back. But other
hashtag team Camille is hashtag team Bogleyub is what I'm hearing.
Low key. Yeah. I kind of am.
I guess if they have if they have two roster spots.
Yeah, we didn't factor that in.
I would love for him to come over this year.
Yeah, and I mean, again, they're not trying to minimize their tax hit because they're not in the tax, but you know, he is a cheaper number. The other thing I was kind of thinking about, like, we've seen a few examples where guys, second rounders in particular, have taken two ways. And so if he wants to come over, and they typically want to bring people over, I am curious if he would entertain coming over on a two-way. And you know, the downside is it doesn't start your NBA clock.
Yeah.
In terms of getting to like unrestricted free agency or something like that. But I have no idea what he's making.
And anyone can just poach you if you show something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, no, I think they retain his second round.
Well, they retain his rights. Yeah.
Afterwards. Okay.
But I mean, it's certainly atypical. But
yeah,
as opposed to just being stashed for a year, I mean, I think we would all rather have him grinding up in Oshkosh, you know, taking the Badger bus back.
I surely would.
Yeah, exactly.
And I should just, in case something happens, I didn't mean anything disparaging there. Like, I love Pat Beverly, and excited to have you back, pal. Let's get that out of the way. But yeah, I guess now we just wait and see on Ryan Rollins and what happens with, we think, that last spot, or if there's one other thing that happens with the Bucks and a potential trade. I mean, that was the interesting part too, Frank. You mentioned Zach Lowe's show where he said, got the sense something was happening today with the Bucks, that we delayed recording of this, that just looking at what they did and some of those deals. And Camille, I think you and I talked about it too. In hindsight, seeing what the Pacers did with Isaiah Jackson, and then seeing the deals that you got with some other guys, and just the fact that Brooke left immediately for a deal that we all kind of said, like, I feel like you could have matched that. Like, those were probably the tea leaves to be reading.
Could have been. So we just didn't read them the same way that they were putting it down. We weren't picking up what they were putting down exactly, but now we're all caught up and still waiting to see what else happens, because the roster of itself, like the big rotation, yeah, that's more solid, but there's still some questions. And like I said, I'm team. That was going to sound bad. It's getting late. And before I said it, I was like, let me not, because that can get clipped. I am all for the Bucks going younger with their players. Like,
what were you going to say?
Are you trying to avoid saying Bogleyub? Do you not want to say Bogleyub? Is that?
Oh, no. I'll tell you guys after the red button goes off.
I was thinking we need a Photoshop of Bogleyub's face into the Beetlejuice movie poster. And then, like late in games, the crowd will yell, Bogleyub, 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 and then see if he appears.
If he is on the club, Marcus is going to break that out at some point during the game. So, yeah.
We've gone completely. We're doing Beetlejuice references. We are completely off the rails.
I've still never seen that movie, by the way. I don't.
Wait, the original or the new one?
Neither.
Wow.
Well, add it to the list. Feels like a good place to wrap it. So the Bucks get Miles Turner. We share our thoughts, and now we see what else transpires here for this team. For Frank and Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.